Good morning, kids. It's so glad to see you. My name is Pastor Joe Jackson, and here we are for another exciting lesson on Bible lessons for kids. In our last Bible lessons that we've been studying together, we have seen about a man named Jacob and how Jacob has been conniving. He's been sneaky. He's been tricking everyone. You remember how he tricked his own brother out of his birthright. He tricked his own father out of giving the blessing to his brother and instead giving it to him. He tricked his family over and over again. And you remember in our last lesson, it caused him to have to move away from home and not be able to stay at home anymore. And he had to go to his uncle's house. And that is where we're picking up today. And we're going to learn that you reap what you sow. The Bible tells us that we reap what we sow. What that means is if you plant an apple seed in the ground, you don't expect to get orange trees. How many of you, if you went outside and you planted green beans in the ground, would expect to get turnips? No, you wouldn't expect to get turnips. That would be silly. But the Bible tells us you reap what you sow. If you sow, that means if you plant things in the ground of being mischievous, of being conniving, if you plant being unkind, if you plant being mean, then you will reap back the same back in your own life. Well, in our lesson today, we're going to learn that Jacob is going to reap what he sowed. And the sad thing in life is you reap what you sow, you reap more than what you sowed, and you reap later than you sowed. When you plant a little single grain of corn in the ground, you don't just get one corn back, you get whole big ears of corn with lots of corn pieces. You don't just get one corn right then, you get a bunch, and it's later. Well, Jacob is now going to see that. And we're picking up our lesson in Genesis chapter number 29. And then Jacob went on his journey, and he came into the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and he beheld a well there, and the well in the field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by, and they waited to be watered the flocks. And there was a great stone upon the well. And the Bible says, and Jacob said unto the men who were there, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. And he said, Know ye Laban, the son of Nabor? And they said, No, we know him. And he said, Is he well? And he said, He is well. Behold, Rachel, his daughter, cometh with the sheep. And he said, Lo, it is high day, neither is any time for cattle should be gathering together. Water ye the sheep, and go and feed them. And they said, We cannot until all the flocks be gathered together, till we roll the stone from the well's mouth, then we water the sheep. And while yet spake, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she kept them. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, and he saw her, that Jacob was so excited that he had seen her. And the Bible says that he went over and he lifted up the well so that they could be watering. And so that everyone could be able to water the sheep together. He's so excited. He said, Hey, we're family. We're connected. I've been sent back here. And the Bible says that she went and brought him to his uncle Laban. And Laban turns to him and says, Surely thou art bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month. And Laban said to Jacob, Because thou art my brother, shouldest thou therefore serve me for naught? Tell me, what shall thy labor be? Here's the deal. He comes and he says, Hey, Jacob, I'm so glad that you're here. Jacob, of course you could stay with me. Jacob, we're going to be family. As he comes in, Jacob learns that he needs to be a hard worker. And Jacob starts working hard for his uncle. And about a month in, his uncle comes and says, Listen, you've been here for a month. You can't just keep working for me for free. What can I pay you? What can we do to make this fair? Now, I'm going to say this just as a thought here. This took a little bit longer than it should have. You're going to find out that Laban, Jacob's uncle, is not exactly the most honest man in the world. We should be honest. We should do things upright, forefront, right away. But Jacob's uncle, he's not exactly that way. He's a little bit conniving, a lot like Jacob. Remember what we said, you reap what you sow. And Jacob's there, and Jacob, the Bible says that he looked over, and Laban had 2 daughters. He had 2 daughters, and his 2 daughters, the name of the eldest, her name was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And the Bible says that Leah was tender-eyed, and Rachel was beautiful and well-favored. And the Bible says that what that means is that Leah, well, she was a very nice person. And you know people like this where they're very nice people and they're very kind people. But she was not the most beautiful young lady in the world. By the way, if you ever watch, I want to tell you something. You look in the life of Rachel and Leah, you'll find out that Rachel is drop dead gorgeous. Rachel is this beautiful young lady. However, what you'll find out, if you study the whole life of Rachel and Leah, Leah is actually a better person than Rachel. You'll find that Leah actually is more honest normally. Leah doesn't cause as many problems. Leah just seems to have this nice, wonderful personality. The Bible says that she was tender-eyed, which means most people understand to be she had a good heart, but she wasn't the most beautiful person. And sometimes I'll tell you that some people, we need to remember that man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. But the Bible says that Leah, though she wasn't beautiful, she was just a normal person. However, Rachel was beautiful. Rachel was this drop-dead beautiful young lady, but sometimes her attitude will get her in trouble. Well, the Bible says that Jacob loved Rachel because she was beautiful. And the Bible says that he looked over at his uncle Laban. Now remember, they did things a little differently than we do today. We wouldn't do this today, but they would often marry within family. You would often marry your cousins. I thank God I'm not marrying any of my cousins, and you should thank God you're not marrying any of your cousins. But back then, that's what they did. And he said, "Hey, uncle, here's what I'll do. I'll work for you for 7 years if you'll let me marry Rachel. I want to marry the beautiful girl." And the Bible says, Laban says, "Well, of course. I mean, that sounds great. You're a good young man, and this is our culture. This is what we do. So yes, if you work for me for 7 years." Could you imagine that? 7 years he worked for this beautiful young lady because he wanted to marry her. I do believe that Jacob loved her very, very much. And Jacob worked hard for 7 years. And the Bible says that Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days. And you can see here as the slides progress, you can see how Jacob aged. And he worked and he took care of the sheep, and he took care of the cattle of his uncle, and he became a hard worker. Remember, he before was a man who liked to live in tents. He was a man who liked to just be kind of an easy life. He no longer is that person. See, when he deceived, he lost the blessings of the life he wanted to have. Instead, had to have the life that he would have to have. By the way, when you deceive people, you reap what you sow. And the Bible says that after 7 years of hard, back-breaking work, he went to his uncle. His uncle didn't come to him. He went to his uncle. I found that often amazing because it showed how much he wanted to marry this young lady, but it also showed how his uncle was willing just to, if Jacob didn't notice how long it was, I don't think the uncle would have told him. Because remember we said the uncle wasn't as honest as he should be. We should always be honest. And the Bible says he came to him and he said, "Hey, my 7 years have come. It's time for me to get to marry Rachel." And Laban said, of course, let's have the wedding." So the Bible says that they went and they had the wedding. And while they were having the wedding, that Laban gathered all the men together. And the Bible says that when the evening was come, he took Jacob and he got Jacob to drink. And he got Jacob to drink so much that Jacob, according to what we understand in the Bible, Jacob was inebriated. That means he was drunk. He couldn't understand. This is why we should never drink alcohol. And the Bible says that he didn't know things, and that Laban brought in and they got time to get married. And as they were getting married, Jacob was like, "I'm so grateful I get to marry the woman." And Jacob marries her. And when the night was over, that Jacob woke up in the morning, and when he looked over, do you know what he realized? Laban had tricked him. Laban had lied. He had not married the woman he wanted to marry. He had not married Rachel. When the wedding ceremony came, Laban had taken and put a veil over top of his eldest daughter Leah, had hidden Rachel away and brought Leah in, and instead made Jacob marry the other sister. How many think that that's absolutely just terrible? It's so mean. It's so wrong. It's lying. It's deceiving. It's exactly what Jacob had done to other people. Jacob is now reaping what he sowed. The Bible says he woke up the next morning and he went, "What in the world? I'm married to the wrong sister." And he went to Laban. And said, "Laban, you promised me that if I work for 7 years, I could marry Rachel." And Laban said, "Yes, I did say that. But here's the thing: your Leah never got married during that time, and it is our culture here. Didn't you know that the firstborn has to be married before the secondborn? So I couldn't let you marry my secondborn child first. I had to marry my firstborn child. And since my firstborn child didn't get married, you had to marry her first." And Jacob is so angry. But Laban says, "You've already married her. You can't get out of it." The Bible says Jacob is extremely angry and wroth. But then Laban turns to him and offers him a terrible, evil idea. He looks at him and says, "Well, how about this? You stay married to my daughter Leah. And then when you get done marrying my daughter Leah, you agree to work for me for free for 7 more years. And then I'll let you marry my other daughter too. And you can have 2 wives." Now, the Bible never meant for people to be married to multiple people at the same time. That was never God's plan. And Jacob should have known better. But Jacob, who has been deceived and was a deceiver himself, is now reaping what he sows. Jacob agrees to this. And Jacob has to work for 7 more years. Young people, I hope that you understand in this the terrible consequences that are going to come. When we are deceiving, when we lie, when we cheat, when we do what's wrong, there will always be a consequence. And sometimes that consequence will be heavy. This consequence that Jacob has to pay will last him the entire rest of his life. For the rest of his life, he will have to deal with the fact that he will be married to sisters. He'll have to deal with the fact that one of his wives really didn't want to marry him, but now she is married to him, and now she's stuck being married to him. And now, in fact, he's stuck married to 2 people. And all this is because he had once been a deceiver. Now he was deceived. Young people, we will reap what we sow. This is why we should always sow kindness. We should sow mercy, because obedience brings blessings. Disobedience removes blessings. Well, I hope you enjoyed this lesson today, another Bible lesson for kids. We'll see you again in our next lesson. Bye.